The ticket that made him laugh sun had just started to rise over the sprawling city of Los Angeles. The morning rush was already buzzing at the international airport. Passengers hurried through the wide glass doors, dragging suitcases, clutching passports, sipping coffee that burned their tongues. Announcements echoed through the halls, calling names that no one could pronounce right, while security lines stretched like restless snakes. Keanu Reeves stood alone near the private jet terminal, dressed simply in a black t-shirt, faded jeans, and a worn leather backpack slung over one shoulder. If you didn't know him, he looked like any ordinary man, a quiet traveler with tired eyes and hair that curled slightly at the ends. There was no flashy entourage, no loud manager, no trail of cameras snapping photos. He liked it that way. But the airport, like the world, didn't always respect quiet souls. Keanu pulled out his ticket and checked the time. He had just wrapped up 3 days of charity work in the city. Surprise visits to children's hospitals, hush-hush donations to shelters, and one late-night meal at a roadside diner, where he sat for hours listening to a young waitress talk about her dreams of going to college. He didn't broadcast any of it. He just did what he always did. Tried to help Dot, but now he was exhausted. He needed to get to Vancouver by noon for a small film project, so he'd booked a last-minute seat on a small private jet. It wasn't about luxury. It was about getting there quietly, without crowds or chaos. He liked traveling light. He stepped forward to the security checkpoint, where a bored-looking agent with a shaved head and a half-finished coffee cup sat behind the counter. The agent glanced up at Keanu, then back at his screen, then did a double take when he saw the ticket. Private jet. The agent snorted. He took the ticket roughly out of Keanu's hand, shaking his head. You, on a private jet? Keanu's brows whereupon slightly, but he stayed calm. Yes, sir. I'm supposed to board in 30 minutes. The agent leaned back in his chair, a mocking grin spreading across his face. Do you know how many people come through here claiming they have special tickets? Celebrities, influencers, wannabes. I've seen it all. Keanu stayed silent, his eyes soft but steady. The agent's voice grew louder. You don't look like you belong in the private jet terminal. Where's your assistant, your fancy suit, your driver? A few people in line behind Keanu started to watch. A couple whispered to each other, trying to figure out if that really was Keanu Reeves or just someone who looked like him. The agent waved the ticket in front of his face like it was a joke. Listen, buddy, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. How about you step aside and wait until I decide to check if this is real? I've got people with real tickets to help. Keanu felt the weight of every eye on him. He looked down at his shoes, then back up at the man. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just said, I understand, but I do have to be in Vancouver by noon. I hope you can check soon. The agent leaned forward, voice dropping to a cold whisper. And I hope you can learn how the real world works. Private jets aren't for people like you. Those words stung more than they should have. Keanu wasn't prideful about his status, but something in the man's tone made old memories stir. Memories of being judged by what he wore, how he looked, how quiet he was. He stepped aside, his backpack slung a little lower now, trying not to feel the eyes following him. He found a small metal bench near the checkpoint and sat down. He watched other travelers pass through with bright lanyards and loud laughter, none of them noticing the man whose face they might see. On a movie screen later that night, he pulled out his phone and checked the time again. 25 minutes until boarding. His fingers trembled slightly, not from anger, but from a tired ache that went deeper than his bones. He thought of the little girl he'd seen at the hospital 2 days ago, the one who'd given him a handmade bracelet and told him to wear this for luck. He still had it on his wrist, woven in faded red threads. He turned the bracelet slowly between his fingers and whispered, I hope you're right. Inside the booth, the agent chuckled to himself as he tapped half-heartedly at his keyboard. He didn't bother to check the reservation system properly. He was sure it was a mistake. Who books a private jet looking like that? He was too used to people putting on fake airs, pretending to be someone they weren't. To him, Keanu looked like any other scruffy man with a cheap backpack. Minutes passed. The line grew longer. People muttered under their breath, annoyed that they were being delayed. The agent just shrugged and sipped his cold coffee, ignoring Keanu completely. But then, something unexpected happened. A young ground staff worker came rushing up, breathless, his airport badge swinging wildly. He stopped at the agent's booth, eyes wide with disbelief. "What's the holdup?" the worker asked, panting. "Sir, we have a private charter waiting on the tarmac. They said a VIP passenger hasn't cleared security yet." The agent snorted. "Yeah, that guy," he said, pointing over at Keanu, "claims he's flying private. I don't buy it." The ground staffer's eyes widened further. "Are you serious? That's Keanu Reeves. We've been told to give him the highest priority clearance. The airport director himself said so." The agent froze, his face draining of color. What? Before he could recover, the sliding doors at the end of the hall opened with a soft whoosh. A hush fell over the area as a tall man in a crisp suit stepped through. The airport director. Everyone recognized him. He was rarely seen on the floor, but today he walked briskly, eyes locked on the agent. He stopped in front of the sub-booth and gave a respectful nod to Keanu, who stood up politely, looking confused. "Mr. Reeves," the director said with a small bow, "I'm deeply sorry for this inconvenience. Please forgive us." The agent's mouth fell open. He stammered. I didn't know. I thought." The director turned sharply to the agent, his voice calm but edged with ice. "This man has done more for this city than you could imagine. He deserves our respect, not mockery." The people in line stood in stunned silence. Some pulled out their phones to snap photos, but the director raised a hand. "No pictures. Please, let this man travel in peace." Keanu glanced at the agent, whose face had turned beet red. He didn't say anything cruel. He didn't shout or scold. He just gave him a soft, understanding look, a look that somehow stung worse than any angry word could. "It's all right," Keanu said gently. "Everyone has bad days." The agent swallowed hard. Unable to meet his eyes, the director gestured to the ground staffer, who immediately took Keanu's bag and guided him through a special lane. As they walked toward the private jet terminal, whispers filled the air. Not about the movies he'd made, but about the way he carried himself. Quiet, respectful, unshaken. As he reached the glass doors leading to the runway, Keanu looked back one last time at the bench where he'd sat alone just moments ago. He touched the little bracelet on his wrist and smiled to himself. Sometimes it was the people who spoke the least who taught the biggest lessons, and the journey was only beginning. The truth behind the both private jets sat on the open tarmac, its white body glinting in the early morning sun. Inside, the cabin was quiet, smelling faintly of fresh leather and brewed coffee. Keanu settled into a window seat, his old backpack resting at his feet. The ground crew outside moved like tiny shadows, preparing for takeoff. Yet even as the engines hummed to life, Keanu's mind replayed the moment at the security checkpoint. The agent's mocking laugh, the eyes of strangers, the hush when the airport director bowed. He didn't like scenes like that. He didn't like being singled out. All he ever wanted was to move through the world quietly, helping where he could, listening more than he spoke. The young flight attendant, a woman named Lana, stood beside him now, holding a cup of tea. Her eyes sparkled, but her hands shook a little as she offered him the drink. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. Keanu looked up, surprised. "For what?" She smiled nervously. "My brother. He was in that children's hospital you visited last month. You sat with him when he was scared. You didn't have to, but you did." Keanu felt his chest tighten. He remembered the boy, small, pale, but with the bravest eyes he'd ever seen. "How's he doing?" Keanu asked. "He's better," she said, her smile growing. "He tells everyone you're his hero." Keanu chuckled, his voice warm. "He's the hero. I was just passing by." Lana's eyes softened. "Well, you changed his life. And mine too. I know you don't like the fuss, but people notice. The airport director, too. He made sure we all knew to treat you with the respect you deserve." Keanu nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of the teacup. "Thank you for telling me. Sometimes I wonder if the small things matter, Lana's eyes widened. They do. You matter. She left him then, moving down the aisle to check the cabin. Keanu turned to the window, watching as the world outside blurred into a warm glow. He thought about the SA agent's words, "You don't belong in a private jet." He thought about all the times people had mistaken his quiet for weakness, his simplicity for foolishness. He smiled to himself. It didn't matter. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to keep a promise to himself, to stay humble. No matter how high the world tried to lift him, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves?" Keanu looked up. The airport director stood at the cabin door. Having boarded moments before takeoff, the director looked tired, but his posture was straight. His hands folded politely. "May I?" he asked. Keanu gestured to the empty seat across from him. Of course, the director sat down carefully, like someone about to confess a secret. His voice was low, so the other passengers couldn't hear. "I wanted to apologize again for what happened back there. It was unacceptable." Keanu shook his head. "It's fine. Really." The director looked down at his folded hands. "It's not fine to me. Years ago, when I was just a junior clerk, you came through this airport. You were already famous back then. I was terrified to speak to you. But you thanked me for helping you find your missing bag. You treated me like an equal. You didn't know it, but that moment, it changed how I saw myself." Keanu blinked. "I didn't realize, that's the thing," the director said, his eyes shining with quiet emotion. "You never realize. You never remember the small moments. But for people like us, they last forever." Keanu's mind drifted to the thousands of faces he'd passed in hotel lobbies, airport gates, quiet hospital rooms. He remembered a time when he himself was invisible. Just another lost kid with no family, drifting through crowded streets. Back then, one kind word would have meant everything. The director reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He held it out, both hands steady now. "This is a letter from some of the staff here. We wanted you to know how much you've given us, just by being you." Keanu hesitated, then took the envelope gently. He didn't open it yet. He didn't trust his heart not to spill over if he did. "Thank you," he said softly. The director stood, bowed once more, not out of duty, but out of genuine respect. "Safe flight, Mr. Reeves." He stepped off the plane, leaving Keanu alone with the hum of the engines and the envelope heavy in his hands. As the jet lifted into the sky, Keanu finally opened the letter. Inside were short handwritten notes, simple thank yous, stories of small moments when he'd stopped, helped, listened, or just smiled. None of it was flashy. None of it made headlines. But together, it painted a picture of a man who had quietly touched lives in ways he'd never expected. He leaned back in his seat, the bracelet on his wrist brushing against the page. A tiny laugh escaped him, half joy, half disbelief. It wasn't the private jet or the bow from the director that mattered. It was this, the reminder that respect isn't bought or demanded. It's earned in every moment you choose to see people when the world looks away. Outside the window, the clouds stretched like soft promises, carrying him forward to whatever came next. And somewhere down there, an agent who once mocked him would go home and maybe, just maybe, remember that even the quietest souls deserve kindness. The flight had only just begun. The story that leaked private jet glided through the clouds, a soft hum filling the cabin. Keanu sat quietly, staring at the folded letter on the small table in front of him. Every now and then, he ran his finger along the edges, feeling the dents where the pen had pressed into the paper. Each thank you note felt like a piece of a puzzle he didn't know he'd been building all his life. He sipped his tea, lukewarm now, and glanced out the window. The clouds stretched forever, like white blankets covering the sleeping world below. He liked flying. It was one of the only places where he could just be. No cameras, no loud questions, no one expecting him to say something profound. Up here, he was just a man going from one place to another. Behind him, Lana, the flight attendant, checked the small snack tray. She looked nervous, glancing at her phone every few minutes. Finally, she walked over and stood beside his seat, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly. Keanu looked up. "Yes." She hesitated. "I'm really Sorry, I don't want to bother you, but something's happened. Keanu raised an eyebrow. Is everything all right? She held up her phone, the screen lit with a social media feed. The top story was a blurry photo of Keanu sitting on the bench at the airport, his backpack at his feet, the SA agent looming over him. The headline read, SA agent mocks Keanu Reeves. You won't believe what happens next. Keanu stared at the screen, his chest tightening. Where did this come from? Someone in line must have taken the photo, Lana said. It's everywhere now. People are talking about how you stayed calm, how you didn't shout or embarrass him. They're calling you bum. They're calling you the king of humble. Keanu couldn't help but laugh, a quiet, tired sound that made Lana smile too. It's not funny, she said, half scolding. You shouldn't have to go through that. People should treat you better. Keanu shrugged. People should treat everyone better. Not just me. Lana nodded, her eyes soft. You're right. That's why people love you. When the jet landed in Vancouver, a small team was waiting to help him with his bag. Keanu slung it over his shoulder anyway, thanking each person by name. Outside the terminal, a handful of reporters had gathered. News of the airport story had spread faster than the early spring wind. As soon as he stepped out, microphones flashed in his face. Keanu, is it true the SA agent laughed at you? How did you stay so calm? Why didn't you call security? What did the airport director say when he bowed? Keanu paused, looking at each face, young, old, tired, curious. He knew they were just doing their jobs, but it still made his stomach twist. It's not about the agent, he said finally, his voice steady. We all have bad days. Sometimes we forget to be kind. What matters is we remember that everyone deserves respect, no matter what they look like, or what they're carrying, or whether they're famous or not. A young reporter, maybe 20, lowered her mic, eyes wide. But why didn't you fight back? Keanu smiled faintly. Sometimes staying calm says more than shouting ever could. Later that day, he sat in a small cafe near the film set, waiting for a meeting. He pulled his baseball cap low over his eyes, but it didn't matter. People still whispered when they saw him. One brave young man in a faded jacket approached him, a shaky phone clutched in his hand. Hey, I'm sorry, the man stammered. Can I say something? Keanu looked up and nodded. Sure, I saw the airport story, the man said, his voice cracking. I've been working this job where people treat me like trash. Minimum wage, long hours, no thanks. But seeing you just to sit there, not shouting, not fighting, but still standing up for yourself, it made me feel, I don't know, seen. Key News. Heart clenched. What's your name, Gabe? Keanu reached out and shook his hand. Thank you, Gabe. The man laughed nervously. No, thank you. You made me believe maybe I'm worth something too. Keanu watched him leave, shoulders straighter than before. He took a sip of cold coffee and looked out the window. How strange life was, how a small moment at a security checkpoint could ripple out and reach someone he'd never meet otherwise. That evening, the film's producer invited Keanu to a fancy dinner at a private club. He tried to say no, he didn't like big dinners, but the producer insisted. So he put on a clean jacket, combed his hair, and showed up. Inside the club, wealthy people leaned over tables covered in candles and fine china. Laughter rose like smoke. A few heads turned when Keanu walked in, some people pointing discreetly. Halfway through dinner, a well-dressed businessman, silver hair slicked back, leaned over from another table. Mr. Reeves, he said loudly. Heard you made quite the scene at Lax. The table fell silent. Keanu put down his fork, feeling the eyes on him again. I didn't make a scene, he said calmly. Someone took a picture. That's all. The businessman laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. Well, maybe next time fly with proper security. People like you shouldn't be sitting around like some backpack tourist. Keanu tilted his head. He saw the server beside the table, standing stiffly, eyes downcast, invisible to these men. He thought about Gabe in the cafe, about this agent, about all the people who get pushed aside every day. Maybe people like me should remind people like you, Keanu said softly. That respect is earned by how you treat the ones you think. No one's watching. The table went quiet. The businessman's smirk faded. Keanu smiled politely, turned back to his plate, and continued eating like nothing had happened. When the dinner ended, the server caught Keanu on his way out. She pressed a tiny napkin into his hand, her voice a whisper. "Thank you," she said, "for saying what no one ever says in here." Keanu smiled. "Thank you for doing what no one ever thanks you for." He walked out into the night air, cool and fresh, his old backpack slung over one shoulder. He could hear the swing of the restaurant door behind him, the hush of voices inside. But he didn't look back. He didn't have to. Some people bowed because they had to. Some people bowed because they wanted to. And sometimes, the quietest moments, the ones no one else saw, were the ones that mattered most. The story was far from over. The letter in the backpack the next morning. Soft rain tapped at the windows of the small hotel room Keanu had chosen. Instead of a big 5-star suite, he liked places like this, plain walls, a window that opened to let in real air, the quiet hum of the city waking up just outside. His old leather backpack lay on the chair by the door. It looked worn, its edges frayed from years of travel. It had been with him everywhere, on film sets, in lonely train stations, at charity shelters where he'd slipped in and out unnoticed. Keanu sat at the small desk, his hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. The story about the TSA agent was still circling online. He'd tried to ignore it, but his phone kept buzzing with messages, friends, fans, people he hadn't heard from in years, all saying the same thing. "You handled it with so much grace." He didn't feel graceful. He felt tired, but not the bad kind of tired. The good kind, the kind you feel when you know you did the right thing, even when no one was supposed to be watching. He pulled his backpack closer, unzipped it slowly. Inside, between an old book and his headphones, was the envelope the airport director had given him. He hadn't opened the last few notes inside. His fingers shook a little as he slid them out now. One was from a janitor at the airport. "Years ago, you thanked me for cleaning up after a spill you didn't even make. You handed me a bottle of water and said, 'I see you. You don't know how much that saved me that day.'" Another was from a young girl who'd once been lost in the terminal. "I was crying. You helped me find my mom. I never forgot." Each word felt heavy in his hands, but light in his heart. It reminded him why he'd stayed the way he was, even when the world told him to act bigger, louder, richer. Fame didn't mean anything if he lost the part of himself that noticed the small things. He tucked the letters back into his bag, zipped it shut, and pulled on his hoodie. Today he had another meeting for the film project, but he wanted to stop by the set early. Not to talk business, but to check on the crew. He knew they worked long hours for little thanks. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The quiet streets of Vancouver glistened under the morning light. Keanu walked with his head low, hands tucked into his pockets, feeling the fresh air on his face. When he reached the set, he slipped through the back gate where the lighting crew was unloading heavy boxes. They froze when they saw him, the star of the film, carrying his own bag. "Need a hand?" Keanu asked. One of the crew, a young guy named Marco, laughed nervously. "Mr. Reeves, you don't have to." "Keanu," he corrected gently, "and yes, I do." He grabbed the end of a large light stand, steadying it as they guided it off the truck. Rain dripped down his hair, but he didn't care. For the next hour, he moved boxes, fetched tools, and asked everyone how they were feeling. The makeup girl, the sound tech, the intern holding coffee cups. People watched him with wide eyes. Some snapped quick photos when they thought he wasn't looking, but he didn't do it for them. He did it because he knew respect wasn't about grand gestures. It was about standing in the rain with people who never got thanked enough. Around midday, during a break, he sat under a small canopy, sipping tea from a paper cup. Marco sat beside him, wiping sweat from his brow. "Can I ask you something?" Marco said, his voice low. "Sure," Keanu said. "Is it true what they're saying? That the airport director bowed to you?" Keanu shifted uncomfortably. He didn't have to, but he did. "Why?" Keanu looked at him, really looked, the tired eyes, the calloused hands. "Because sometimes we don't realize how much small kindness means to people until they tell us years later. We think no one notices, but they do. Marco nodded slowly, his eyes misty. I wish more people were like you. Keanu smiled faintly. I wish I'd been kinder earlier in my life, but I'm trying now. They sat in silence, listening to the rain patter on the canopy. Later that evening, the director of the film pulled Keanu aside. She was older, wise, with eyes that had seen every kind of ego in the industry. You know, she said, this film will be a success because you're in it, but it will be remembered because of who you are behind the camera. Keanu laughed lightly. I'm just doing my part. No, she said firmly. You're reminding people that respect is real. It's not a brand. It's not a headline. It's the way you treat the person who opens the gate, the person who cleans the floor, the person who says you can't board your flight. Keanu's smile faded into something softer, a quiet understanding that maybe his life wasn't about the big moments on screen, but the small moments off it. He thought of the agent back at the airport, the man's face when the director bowed. He wondered if the man had gone home that night and told someone what happened. Maybe his wife, maybe his kids, maybe he'd even thought about it when he looked in the mirror. Sometimes the smallest moments took the longest to sink in. When the day wrapped, Keanu walked back to his hotel under a clear night sky. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets fresh and clean. The city lights glowed like stars that had fallen just close enough to touch. He paused on a quiet corner, took out the bracelet the little girl had given him, the one he still wore every day. He traced its frayed threads and whispered, "Thank you for the luck." Inside his backpack, the letters rustled softly when he moved. They felt like a promise that no matter what happened tomorrow, he would keep showing up, quiet, humble, unshaken. Because respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you carried, in your pockets, in your hands, in the way you spoke to the world when no one was watching. And sometimes, when they least expected it, the world bowed back. The unexpected visitor. A week later, the buzz around the airport story had finally begun to fade online, but the ripple it created was far from over. In the small hotel room in Vancouver, Keanu sat cross-legged on the bed, reading through new letters that had found their way to him. Some were slipped under his door by hotel staff. Others had been handed to him on set. Every line carried the same thread, people telling him how one moment of quiet kindness had reminded them that respect still existed in the world. He folded the letters carefully, tucking them into the side pocket of his backpack. He liked knowing they were close, reminders that the world could still surprise you, that people noticed even the small things. He was about to lie down and rest when a soft knock came at his door. He checked the clock. 8 p.m. No meetings were scheduled tonight. He opened the door to find Lana, the flight attendant from the private jet, standing there with her brother, the same boy from the children's hospital he had once visited. The boy clutched a small paper bag to his chest. "Hi, Mr. Reeves," Lana said, smiling nervously. I hope it's okay. We just wanted to say thank you in person. Properly." Keanu stepped aside. "Come in, you're always welcome." The boy, maybe 12 now, with bright, determined eyes, handed him the paper bag. "I made you something." Keanu sat down at the little desk, opening the bag slowly. Inside was a simple friendship bracelet, made of blue and green threads, uneven and imperfect, but tied tight at the ends. "I wanted you to have one like mine," the boy said. "For luck." Keanu blinked, fighting back a wave of warmth that washed through his tired bones. "It's perfect. Can you help me put it on?" The boy grinned, looping the bracelet around Keanu's wrist, tying a knot with small, careful fingers. "My mom says you're our hero," he said shyly. Keanu ruffled his hair. "Your mom is the real hero, and you're the strongest kid I've ever met." Lana looked at her brother, then at Keanu. "You have no idea how much what you did means to us. Not just the hospital visit, but everything." Keanu leaned back in his chair, studying their hopeful faces. "Sometimes I think people forget how powerful they are. A smile, a thank you, a moment to listen. They're stronger than you think." They sat together for a while, talking about little things, favorite movies. The boy's dream to become a pilot someday. Lana's plan to go back to school. When they finally stood to leave, Lana hesitated at the door. Did you Ever hear from that TSA agent? She asked quietly. Keanu shook his head. No, I hope he's okay, Lana said. Maybe your kindness reached him, too. Keanu smiled. Maybe. The next morning, a small envelope was waiting at the hotel's front desk when Keanu checked out. There was no return address. He opened it in the cab on the way to the set. Inside was a short note written on line paper, the words shaky and uneven. Dear Mr. Reeves, I'm the TSA agent. I don't know why I acted that way. Maybe I was angry at the world. Maybe I was jealous. I went home that night and my son asked me why I looked so sad. I told him the truth. He said I should say sorry to you. So, I'm saying it now. Thank you for not shouting at me when I deserved it. Thank you for showing me what respect looks like. I want to be better. I promise I'll try. Sincerely, Eddie. Keanu folded the letter, his chest heavy but light at the same time. Forgiveness didn't change what had happened, but it gave it a new ending, one that felt more human, more honest. On set that afternoon, Keanu carried a different energy. People could feel it. He joked with the crew, carried boxes again during a break, and spent his lunch sitting with the youngest intern, who had been too shy to speak to him until now. The intern asked him, "Why do you do all this? You don't have to." Keanu chewed his sandwich thoughtfully. Because the world doesn't get kinder unless we do. Because respect isn't about who's important. It's about remembering that everyone is. The intern nodded, wide-eyed, and Keanu saw in him a glimpse of his younger self. The boy who'd once slept on friends' couches, who'd walked alone down dark streets hoping someone would see him. The boy who'd needed a small kindness to keep going. That evening, Keanu stood at the edge of the city, looking out at the skyline as the sun slipped away. He touched the two bracelets on his wrist, one from the hospital girl, the other from the boy who'd come to say thank you. In his pocket, the TSA agent's letter rested like a quiet promise that even the hardest hearts can change. He knew, now that none of this was really about a plane ticket, or an agent laughing, or an airport director bowing. It was about how the smallest moments could reach further than you'd ever expect. How every person you see is fighting a battle you can't see. How respect, real respect, is never about power, but about presence. As the city lights blinked on one by one, Keanu whispered to himself, "Stay humble, stay kind, always." And somewhere in the noise of traffic and distant laughter, he felt the world whisper back, reminding him that sometimes the quietest lessons echo the longest. The bow that never fed. A few weeks later, the story of the TSA agent and the airport director had faded from the news feeds. The world had moved on. There were new stories, new gossip, new headlines to keep people busy. But for Keanu, the lesson lingered like a warm light that refused to go out. He was back in Los Angeles now, the film in Vancouver wrapped. He could have taken time off, flown away to some quiet island to rest. But instead, he spent his mornings doing something few people knew about, visiting places most people ignored. He slipped into crowded soup kitchens, leaned against door frames in homeless shelters, sat cross-legged on old wooden floors where kids with nowhere else to go gathered to read books. He never announced it, never brought a camera. He just showed up, one human to another. One morning, he walked into the same airport where it all started, lax, humming with crowds and rolling suitcases, coffee cups clutched by half-asleep travelers. He had a simple domestic flight this time, no private jet, just a small ticket folded in his back pocket. As he approached the security checkpoint, he spotted a familiar face, the TSA agent, Eddie, the same man who had mocked him weeks before. Their eyes met. Eddie straightened, his shoulders tense, but this time there was no smirk, no sarcasm. He stepped forward, his hands twisting nervously at his sides. "Mr. Reeves," he said, voice low but steady. Can I talk to you for a second?" Keanu stepped aside with him. Out of the flow of passengers, of course, Eddie cleared his throat, eyes darting to the floor. "I wanted to thank you for the letter you sent back. You didn't have to write me. You didn't have to forgive me." Keanu smiled gently. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better." Eddie's voice cracked. "My son saw that video of me. He asked why I was so angry. I told him the truth. I promised him I'd do better. Keanu put a hand on his shoulder. And you have. That's what matters. People in line began to notice them. Some pulled out phones, but Eddie didn't flinch this time. He stood taller, pride in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I'll remember what you showed me, Eddie said. Respect, it doesn't come from a uniform or a badge. It comes from here. He tapped his chest, near his heart. Keanu nodded. I'm proud of you. They shook hands, simple and human. There were no headlines this time. No dramatic bow from the airport director. Just two men standing eye to eye, both changed by a single moment that had traveled further than they ever expected. Later that day, Keanu sat on a plane, a simple economy seat this time, the roar of the engines humming softly round him. He leaned back, touching the two bracelets on his wrist, one from the little girl in the hospital, the other from the boy who'd come to say thank you. He pulled out his old backpack, found the envelope of letters he kept tucked safely inside. They were worn now, the edges curled, ink faded in places, but he liked it that way. Reminders that the smallest acts of kindness never really faded. They just folded into the world, waiting for the next moment when someone might need them most. As the plane landed, the passenger beside him, a woman who had recognized him but said nothing all flight, finally leaned over. Can I ask you something? She said shyly. Keanu turned to her, his eyes soft. Of course. Why didn't you ever tell the world about the things you do? She asked. You could inspire so many people. He thought about it, the roar of the engine, softening to a hum beneath him. Because, he said slowly, it's not about what people see. It's about what they feel. Kindness isn't a show. It's a choice. The woman smiled, her eyes damp with quiet understanding. Thank you. You remind me that the world can still be good. Keanu chuckled, small and warm. The world is good. Sometimes it just needs someone to remember. Outside the airport, the city stretched before him, loud, messy, imperfect. But somewhere out there, a boy was wearing a friendship bracelet. A TSA agent was teaching his son how to treat people better. And strangers were whispering his story not because of his fame, but because of what he chose to carry in his heart. As he walked away, the sun broke through the clouds above, a soft golden light that fell on his shoulders like a quiet bow, a reminder that respect, once given freely, never truly disappears. And maybe, just maybe, the best part was knowing that when he was gone, the kindness would keep moving, from one person to another, like a simple promise that the smallest moment could change everything.